Well, welcome back to a new episode of the Win More, Live Better podcast. And today we're diving back into the volleyball world. And I'm really excited to bring you my conversation today with Coach Dan Meske. He's the head women's volleyball coach at the University of Louisville. He's coming off of his first full year as being a head coach since his transition into the head role there in the program. But I'm catching you this spring with, I know, as the life of a head coach, there is no quote unquote down period. There's no quote unquote off season in the life of being a head coach. So the fact that you're willing to take some time to have the conversation today, Dan, means a lot. So first off, more than anything, thanks for participating and having the conversation.
Thanks for the invite. I'm excited to be here.
Um, I I think I had a number of different areas that I was like, ooh, I could start here, I could start there. I thought there was a lot of opportunities that could lead to some really good insights to begin, but I'd actually want to maybe start with coming off of that first year as a head coach and just now that you've had a few months to digest it, to reflect, to kind of maybe go through whatever your process has been for evaluating the season, yourself, the team, and so forth. I actually kind of wanted to start there and just as you kind of now have had some time to reflect on it, what have been some of the biggest like lessons learned for yourself as a leader, as a head coach, since this first season in transitioning into the role?
Well, it's a good time to catch me on that too, because I'm about 3 months removed from the end of our last season, and we got upset in the Sweet 16, and it left a little sour taste in your mouth. And I do think, like, I researched a lot and studied a lot on dealing with failure and all that. And one of the best things I took from that is like failure. You have to take more from it than it took from you. And so again, losing in Sweet 16, there's a lot of teams that would kill to get there. For us, that felt like we underachieved. So there was a lot of reflection based on the season of what could have we done better, what did we miss out on, what did we do well that maybe sometimes the ball didn't bounce our way. But one of the biggest things that I took from the entire season was moving from an assistant to head coach, which I probably undervalued how different it would be. It was more different than I thought. And I think part of me wanted to manifest that it wouldn't be different, and it just was. But the biggest thing was that nothing was as important as I thought it was, but everything was important. And so, like, when I first took the job, I remember like a meeting with one of our players in particular. I was just like, when there's a head coach change, especially at the Division 1 level, but really any competitive sport, the Sharks are going to circle, and we've got great players and a great team. And man, like, there's a new head coach, and okay, what's going to happen? So you just want to retain your roster. And so I remember having a meeting with a specific player and being like, man, I have to nail this meeting. Like, yeah, I had all these notes, and I had, okay, if it goes this way, I'll go this way. And if it goes that way, I'll go this way. And she comes in and she's like, oh, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. I can't wait. And it was like there was no meeting, but it was important to have the meeting, but the meeting wasn't as important as I thought. And I found myself along the way building some things up that it was like, it's important that I'm doing this, but it's not important that I do this perfectly. Like, I just need to be good, and I need to continue to show up and continue to have consistency. So I think that's the biggest thing I took away, is that I've got to continue to, make sure I identify the things that are important, but I don't need to build things up as being more important than they are. And the second big takeaway was how important staff is. And I always knew that, but I was a great assistant in my opinion because I only thought about player development. And I always thought about my position group, and just I went to bed thinking about it. And so I thought, as a head coach, that'll be the same strength. I'll be thinking about the team all the time. And I found out really quickly that as the head coach, I probably had to shift that and be thinking probably about the staff more than I'm thinking about the players, because the players, I've got multiple staff here, 3 assistant coaches. We have a chief of staff that, works as our general manager. And, that's 4 different people that have all these, really intimate touch points with our team. Like, they're really connected with our team. And it's not very realistic for me to think that I could be more connected than them to 16 or 17 different players. So I learned really quickly that investing in the staff and keeping them in the forefront all the time, even at the expense sometimes of the players, serves the program better. Those are probably the 2 biggest ones.
dive in for a moment, just like maybe specifically kind of what that process for you in evaluating yourself kind of looks like, what it sounds like, both you maybe with other people, but also even inside like your own head a little bit. And I'm interested if was it different in any way after a year as transitioning into the head coaching role as a compared to being an assistant?
Yeah, it was different in the sense that, yeah, at the end of the year when I was an assistant, I was in charge of our defense and our middle blockers. And so I would evaluate our defense and our middle blockers. And I had like this little section of the team that was like mine, and I had a lot of ownership of it. And that was great. And as a head coach, I'm still evaluating that piece, but now I'm evaluating five or six more pieces. So being able to kind of, give as much time as needed to each area, I found was like a skill that I hadn't worked on a ton. But for me, when you're like, what does that look like? When we lost in Lincoln, Nebraska, there's a place called the Mill, and so like the day after we lost, I went and bought a journal at the Mill because it was like, every year is not rinse and repeat. It was like, okay, here's an emotion that I'm feeling at the end of the season, and here's like a connection to last season that's on my desk. And that next day, like you can see all the tabs here, but I've got like my January, February, March. I mapped out the whole season because for me, it was like, the only failure is if you stop moving. Like you got to keep moving forward. So, that's what the self evaluation looks like for me. I'm a big proponent of journaling. It's not something that I like make myself do every 15 minutes or every 15 minutes every day. But it's something that I find myself coming back to. And when I sit at my desk and have time for creative thinking, I'm usually grabbing a journal and just kind of writing down what am I thinking in this moment. And again, from that journal, I remember just last week I shared with the team. I wrote down a quote from a player at the end of last year. And I never would have remembered that had I not journaled about that. And I shared it with the team, and I thought it spoke volumes to where our team wants to go right now. She talked about, I just want everybody to believe in themselves wholeheartedly and be able to execute and have fire in big moments. And it was like such a powerful statement, but I would not have remembered it word for word had I not written it down. So for me, self-reflection and all that comes in the form of journaling a lot.
Think that then it coincides with what you were describing earlier, maybe that shift that you had of knowing like, hey, you've always known that the staff plays obviously a really critical role in nurturing, um, pouring into them and investing in them is going to help obviously with player development. But when you talk about that shift happening now, as you kind of start to think about and gear up for this upcoming season, what does that look like for you in terms of now being maybe, I don't know if more intentional is the right word with how you're investing in your staff, but what are some of the things that you're planning on doing differently or you are doing differently to kind of bring them to the fold and help them grow alongside your players in the process?
I think as an assistant coach, you're not very quick to point out your peers, like what they're doing well. You're having casual conversations and things like that. But I don't know if you're always like catching people being good. And, I do think as a coach, there's a great a book, I think it's by Anson Dorrance it's called Catch Them Being Good. And it's just all about how we do like proactive coaching. And, there's a ratio of, I don't remember what it is, but it's like for every one negative thing that you will say to a player, you need to have about like 10 positive or eight, whatever that ratio is, because they're going to hold on. That negative one is so much more impactful. So for me and how I kind of communicate with the staff, I find myself catching them being good. And I think we have such an excellent staff here. I'd be hard pressed to say like, oh, this is their weakness or this is something they don't do well. It's like I find myself being motivated by them and pointing out like, man, I'm just, we just hired a new assistant coach, I think a month ago. And I don't know how many times I've chatted with her of just like, I'm so glad we got you here because like, she brought this thing. It's actually, what's today? Tuesday. So we have Thankful Thursdays. I thought it was tomorrow, but like she brought this thing Thankful Thursdays to our team. And it was like she showed up with an idea. She didn't show up being like, okay, I'm at Louisville. What do I do now? Give me my checklist. It was like, we're like, hey, what do you think you want to do for culture? And she's like, oh, here you go. Thankful Thursday. And I was like, man, like how great is that to like you show up and you're bringing these ideas as opposed to waiting for people to tell you kind of what to do. And so I find myself catching those moments and being like, hey, this is like really impactful. Like you really make a difference here by doing these things. So I don't think it's any different than that. I think catching people being good and making sure that that's like you can kind of slow things down. We're in an MTV. Well, MTV's dated now. I sound old, but we're in a what's next, generation where it's like, scroll to the next thing. If you don't slow things down and pause it for a second and really kind of let them know what's going on, what's next? And so I think that's pretty important for the staff.
Yeah. Recently, and I've released this episode, I had a conversation with he's a researcher, professor, based in California, and he's basically been one of like the leading researchers on the neuroscience of trust over the last couple decades. And in our conversation, I asked him, I was like, all right, if there's one or two core things that any coach could go do to immediately foster more impactful trust or deeper trust within their like teams,
Hold
the
on, let me
first
guess
thing,
it. Let me guess it.
okay,
Because I might get it wrong, but to me,
it's okay.
when I would want to build trust, I want to play this game. Like one big one, the two that come to mind, I might be completely wrong with both, would be consistency and then vulnerability. And I think
Mhm.
like to me, when building trust, those are super important. But I wanted to make sure I could get my guess in before our researchers tells me actually what it is. So I'm curious,
No,
what were his top two?
well, so I should say it wasn't necessarily of like, hey, these are ranking. He just it was basically like these are the ones that I think are the easiest low-hanging fruit to start per se. Now, to that point, so his work is all built around like oxytocin in the brain and how that is obviously like the neurochemical for like love and for connection and for belonging. And so his the eight building blocks for trust spell out an acronym that he calls oxytocin. So the very first one is ovation, which is basically what you were just describing, the idea of like recognizing and celebrating people for doing things and not just being like a deficit detective. Let me constantly look out where like there's a fire or something to fix. But and so one of the things that he and I talked about is like what gets celebrated gets repeated. And I think we see that with players, but that obviously certainly applies to us as a staff. So that was one. I think he didn't use we talked about vulnerability. He didn't use that word specifically, but there is this aspect of like how invaluable that is and how that fosters that psychological safety. And part of it too is like helping your players and your staff feel connected to like Dan is not just a head coach, like he's a human being. And there are layers to who you are, and like when you actually can peel back some of those and show those in a way that's authentic and so forth, that actually can, yes, help build trust. So I think you were on the right track, maybe slightly different words that he used, but
Well, vulnerability might be in there if there was a V in oxytocin, but there's not. What was the X in oxytocin? What was the acronym?
I didn't give him a hard time about this. I should have. He kind of cheated a little bit. He it was expectation. And so
Okay, I was
he
gonna say, I
like
was like, what X word did he come? Okay, expect
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
So
Okay,
I didn't give him a hard time about that on the show, but the point being how healthy it is as a group to pursue things that are highly challenging, right? And I
yeah,
think like that doesn't have to be, separate from, pursuing difficult goals and things like that. So,
that's
um,
cool.
yeah. So anyway, when you brought that up, kind of the recognition piece of it, I was like, oh, this ties in so well. And this was literally a very recent conversation. Um, I think one of the other things that I was really curious about as maybe as a starting point for the conversation was, you're taking over a program that you had been part of for a long time, and you're also taking of a program that's already kind of functioning and operating at a pretty high championship level. And so I was kind of just interested in what are some of the unique opportunities and advantages of that, but also what are some of the unique challenges that come with, hey, it's not like I'm just, tearing this thing apart and we're building from scratch. It's like, no, 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 we're building off of something that's already functioning. And just I was just kind of interested, what are some of the challenges that you've ran into or that you noticed in that process?
Um, that's a great question because so I was a head coach at a Division II school for 2 years,
Mhm.
15 years ago, and then I was a head coach, or I am a head coach right now at a Division I school for one season. So I've got 3 years of head coaching experience over the course of a 20-year coaching career. So I'm a newbie when it comes to this, but I do know that Division II, I was taking over a sub 500 program in a pretty nice recruiting area with an emerging club where you could really recruit juniors. And it was just a great situation because the expectations were super low, but the opportunity was super high. And so it was very low stress from the aspect of like, I feel like the worst I could do is better than that they had done. Like I really did feel that. I was just like, man, like if we just the fact that we have some newness has already created momentum. Like I think we're going in the right direction. So that was so different than it was here. But I would much rather have the situation that I had here because there was already, whatever the acronym was for oxytocin, we probably had a lot of them. We had a lot of trust in the program. We weren't relying on the portal very heavily, like within our program. So we all had 3 and 4 year players that had really grown within the program and helped recruit the rest of the program. So that part of it was great because there was such a great foundation. But there were challenges with that too, because we were coming off of losing in the national championship. I believe as maybe we were the 4 seed overall, but we kind of squeaked into the 4. We were kind of between the 4 and maybe 4 and 7 seed, and we were able to make it to the national championship. We upset the number 1 seed. Like we really had a magical run the year before I took over. So like when you talk about my D2, like expectations were super low. It was the complete opposite here. Like I got the left right punt, like 1-2 punch. So that part was challenging because it was like there's only one place to go if you don't win at all, and that's down, just in the minds of casual observers. So being able to have that strong foundation, I think helped with that because, while there are high standards here, I think the expectations aren't always just like, oh, it's a failure if we don't do X, Y, Z. It's the standards are just really high. So that part helped. But again, I do think where we were at sometimes was like there's no learning period, like I do pride myself on I want to be the most improved head coach in the country every year, but there's also not this thing of like, oh, like we'll figure it out when we figure it out. Like we got to get moving, and we got big goals. Like that's why that's why these players came here, is they want a chance to win it all, and we need to provide an experience that does that. So it was again, I wouldn't be here if that didn't motivate me and that didn't make it fun to show up to work every day, because whether you want to call that pressure or urgency or whatever it is gives me great purpose in life. And I love being around it because every day seems to matter. There's something I'm going to bed thinking about, like, oh, could I do this? Or maybe we could do that. I had a volleyball dream last night. It was a really weird one. It was like I was playing and the head coach in the state, he was playing too. It was really weird, but like, it's always on my mind. And it's like, cool. It's a cool thing to occupy your mind. So it was the good and the bad. There was both sides of that.
Yeah. No, I think anytime you get to pursue something great or pursue something that requires, anything that's like on this pathway to excellence, it's like there's so much potential joy, fulfillment, like the meaning behind it, and yet there's always going to be a cost. There's always going to be sacrifices along the way. So it certainly is a give and take. You mentioned earlier, like one of the things that made you a good assistant was, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is like a lot of coaches, they ascend through the coaching ranks because they become great, particularly around like player development, like the technical aspects, maybe the tactical aspects of a sport. And then when you get transitioned into the head coaching role, there are some of those that still get played, some of those strengths that still matter, and there are now other hats that you wear and other responsibilities that you have, even just beyond that little niche area. Could you talk a little bit about what had to maybe shift for you and how you approach that shift from, being this elite technical, physical skill developer in players to now, okay, I'm in the head coaching role and I'm not just responsible for that. Like I am responsible for everybody that's also creating the environment and everybody in this entire program that has a touch point on us trying to go win a championship.
That so the technical part of it, I wrestle with that, exactly that question you talked about, because I love the technical part of the game, and I have, I feel like I have a really good grasp of the way I like the game to be played, the way I like to teach it. So that part I have wrestled with for the last year, but I'm also like very quick, like we talked about that self-reflection. I'm very quick to like drop strong opinions that I've had. And so like the biggest thing was, last year I loved standing up for matches. And this is like a really fun volleyball thing everybody can watch. Every staff is different, right? Like the head coach, the assistant, and so for the longest time, 10 years I was here, game day adjustments and in-match management, I was kind of doing that, and I was really good at it, and I really enjoyed it. It's my most favorite part of coaching. And so when I became a head coach, I'm like, well, I'm certainly not giving that up. Like I love it. Like there's other ways to do this. But I did shift my responsibilities. I went from running the defense to running the offense. There's some nuances involved in that, and kind of how you set up your game day plan and all that. And so I stood last year, and by the last couple games where we really hit our stride, I was sitting, and I was kind of like letting letting the game happen like for the team and not so much trying to make it happen to them. And I found that to be really effective for our team to play well. And I'm glad that it didn't take me like 4 years to try something new. But like that's the biggest one that I've seen so far is in match, like just like again, you talked about the technical thing to bring up this question, but it's like I still really am involved with that. But now I'm more like, okay, let's work with our assistant coaches and their position group based on what I kind of think and what they really believe. And let's make this plan that works for the whole group so that I can kind of have more touch points. And then again, I think I'm starting to already kind of step back a little bit on some things I really enjoyed and I thought were really big strengths of mine because I just don't know that they serve the team the best way. It just the way that the season kind of played out. So I think that's something from year 1 to year 2 that I'll be kind of experimenting with is stepping back a little bit and not to get too much in the weeds, but in sports, when you run offense, you have control of what you're doing. And so you watch your team the most. You control what you're doing on game day. You come in with a plan and you nudge your plan here and there. So there shouldn't be a lot of game day stuff to do. And that's what I'm doing now as the head coach. I always think the head coach should do offense because when you watch film, you watch your team. Well, for 10 years, I was doing defense. When you do defense, you watch other teams' offenses and you set your defense up to be able to be resilient against it. And so you have a plan, but you show up on game day and you have to, it's the first time you really see that offense live. So you're constantly adjusting. And that's what I was doing on game day. And so that's a big reason that I've kind of shifted my role on game day, even though I felt like, oh, this in-match management and all that is, I love it. And it's my strength. I just found the way that we've shifted roles. That's something I need to adjust to. So.
One of the other things that I've heard you talk about in previous like conversations and interviews and things, you can start to, based off of the people's responses, you can start to pick up, values and things that are important to them. And one that I've heard you talk about is joy and how important that is for you, not only for yourself and the staff, but also in the culture and the environment that you're trying to create. I'd be interested where that kind of comes from, and then twofold, like how do you go about intentionally like fostering that or even protecting that in an environment where there's a lot of things that I know can come in and like kind of steal from it or kind of disrupt it.
Yeah. Uh, that part, I guess that part can be a challenge sometimes, but it's like, I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on, but I read this book Flow by Mahali. I don't know how to say his last name. But like he talks about how when like your challenges meet your skills and there's like this point where they're just kind of nudging each other. And that's this flow state where like time kind of starts to disappear. And yeah, volleyball in general for me has always been that where it's like, when I first started playing volleyball, I didn't even have a phone. But then, 15 years ago, we all had phones. But during practice, you don't have your phones. And in college, phones have never really made their way into the gym. Now we have our phones. We're filming stuff for, maybe social media and helping on our program. But we're really not connected to our phones. And the 2 to 3 hours that we spend as a group, I say this probably once a month to our team. I'm like, I'm just so thankful for this time we get to spend disconnected from the world and just like fully engrossed in an activity trying to achieve something bigger than any of us could have ever imagined. And that flow state to me is just like, I find myself like looking forward to that driving to work. Another big thing when you talk about like fostering that is, we've got 16 to 18 players. And, I haven't done the research on this, but I've been around enough teams that like one player that maybe we'll call him a red flag on a team of 16 to 18 is not, it's a big deal, but it's not like a deal breaker because there's, peer pressure and all that around. If you have a good culture, that person's really going to stick out if they're trying to grab people kind of down with them or find, bad habits or whatever. If you feel really strong about the rest of that 16, that one is really not going to nudge your team the wrong way. Now, if you have two, you have a problem because those two will most likely couple up, and then that couple is going to probably turn into a triple. And then if they don't turn into a triple, they're at least going to divide the team. So now you've got 3 different splits. So for us, we've always been like, man, we'll only take a chance on one player. And we have. Like we've taken chances on a player and been like, all right, well, we can't take another chance on someone for 3 years until this player's done because we can't risk having two. so I don't know what the ratio is, but I know with a group of 16 to 18, you can get away with one, but you can't get away with two. And I would venture to say if you're on, if you coach, golf and you have 8 or 6 on your team, I don't think you can have one because it would just suck the energy and it would suck the joy out of the team. And so we've been really good that we've only ever really had, maybe one, person that we're not so sure about from the, and a red flag would be like you're recruiting them and they're talking about, you ask them about something challenging in their life and they everything's somebody else's fault, or they're dogging their parents, or they're not taking accountability. Typically if they end up on our team, they're a pretty fantastic player, and it's like, okay, let's get you in the right environment and let's see if you nudge the right way. And we've had really good success with that. But man, if there were more than a few on a team, it's like we always say, my biggest thing recruiting is I have to be excited to coach every day. If that's not a yes, we're not going to get to a yes with a player like that, because it's just, I mean, it's what we do for a living. I mean, winning's fun and everything, but enjoying what you do every day is more important.
There was a clip that I came across recently, and I don't even remember what exact sport. It might have been a women's basketball coach, but she was making the comment about how, like, I'm showing up every day and I'm around you all, my team, my players, my staff, more than my own family. It's like, you best believe I'm going to make sure that I'm bringing in people that I want to spend every day with, and I'm excited to come up and love and serve and things like that. And so I think to that point, it is like it's value. It's incredibly important who you get on that bus and who you bring into it, not just from a player standpoint, but everybody that has a touch point in the program. So I appreciate that. Um, Outside of maybe joy, and I don't know if this is something that you've, explicitly defined, or maybe it's something that through reflection it just kind of comes out naturally, but what are some of the other kind of, I guess, core values that you feel like really kind of shape how you view leadership, how you view the kind of culture and things that you're trying to help create and foster for everybody in the team?
Um, Yeah, I've been asked this a couple times, and like I don't know, I didn't really apply for this job. So like when you apply for a job, you like write down everything, and I remember when I applied for that Division 2 job, I had this great pyramid that I made, and some of the aspects of that pyramid really stuck with me. It was really a pyramid of how you build up to confidence. And it started. The foundation of it was, I think it was skills, and then we had some interpersonal things of how we communicate with each other, how do we communicate with ourselves, and then it built up to how do we have true confidence that's unshakable on game day. And so when you get to like core values, I've never like truly defined those. And I was actually thinking about that this morning. I was like, I've never walked into somebody's house who has like their core values for their family on the wall. So like when you walk into our offices, there isn't like, authenticity on the wall or whatever. Like you better show up like exuding what that is. Like, I've always thought too, like, yeah, putting like authentic on the wall, it's the least authentic thing you can do. Or like trust, like put trust on the wall. Like now we all trust each other. It's like you could break trust in a heartbeat. Like you can't put that on the wall. You have to live it. So from a core value standpoint, and you touched on leadership too, I do think one thing that I bring up a lot though is courage. I'm really fascinated with courage and how courage, coincides with confidence, and like the courage to lead, and especially with 18 to 22-year-old, for us, female athletes, the courage to like speak up if you feel like it might rub people the wrong way, but you feel like it's in the best interest of the group. Like the courage it takes to do that is like really, really honorable. And like I really have respect for that, because it's just not everybody's wired that way. And I do think too with our program, you talk about a core value, being yourself is a really big part of it. I think that's been our secret sauce, is like, we've taken some players that we've been like, man, and I really believe this, like, I don't know if this player would have gotten to where they've gotten anywhere but here, because we were able to kind of, work with them and kind of let them be themselves and get to where they're going to get on their own terms with a little bit of a nudge from us. But it certainly isn't like, okay, you're here, it's the Louisville way or the highway. Like it's time, and I felt that when I went to college, that it was kind of like, shape up or like ship out or that kind of thing. And that's just not how we've run our program. It's like, we're going to invest in you. And, it might take a year, it might take 3 years, but we're going to break that down and give you the steps to get there. And if you walk the path, this is going to be a win-win for both of us. So from a core value standpoint, I think courage is huge. And the ability to really be yourself and then, work towards being the best version of yourself, is a great way to kind of just work in teams and work towards a common goal.
Some of which you kind of just spoke around, but how do you define that courage? Like, and just kind of, and I think with it as well, like, what are the ways that you see it show up day to day from your seat, from your point of view as the leader or as a head coach?
Well, I think it's similar to kind of what I touched on too, and I find myself thinking about this. We don't have captains on our team yet, and sometimes it's like, do you have captains? Do you not? Like we always kind of let each season be its own story and kind of speak to us. And if we're listening correctly, that's when those seasons really take off. If we're kind of shaping the story before it's really written, that's where sometimes we have pushback from the team and all that. But that courage, that's why that's on my mind a lot right now, is we don't have captains yet. And we have a lot of leaders. Like we have a lot of leaders that are very different. We have like lead by example. We have emotional leaders. We have connectors. Like we have a great group. And not all the leaders are like juniors and seniors. Some have like really good leadership qualities that are younger players that are just, again, they're courageous in their, in their communication with each other and all that. So again, it's one of those things that I do think we have to let the story kind of speak to us of how that's going to shake out. So, but the most specific example is speaking up for the good of the group when you feel like it might kind of ding your social status within the team. I think that's such valuable like currency to college. Yeah, not even just to college, to anybody. They don't want to lose social connection and social status with each other. They certainly don't want to do something embarrassing or be pointed out for that. And so the courage to speak up because you feel like it's for the betterment of the group and not just the betterment of you, that always really to me is like a wow moment. And you get those sometimes in post game, you get sometimes in like a timeout. They come out in different ways, but when you're around them, like as a coach, when you've seen a lot of teams, you're just like, man, like this is a kid who really gets it. And there's a few kids that understood that. There's some that are going to be turned off by it, like that. You can't avoid that. But that was a really courageous moment that they just had. So that's what we're trying to find within our team.
I love it. I'm a little biased because I as a sidebar about a year ago, I basically went through and asked myself, okay, hey, all these coaches and leaders that I've worked with, like, what are the qualities? Like, if they want to become the best version of themselves and increase their impact, okay, what are the things that go into that? And I basically created this like equation, we'll say. And underneath it, though, one of the pillars was courage because I very intentionally use the word courage over confidence. And I'm not trying to, that's a whole separate sideline. But I think a lot of it is around what you just described.
Well,
And
go
I,
into that for me real quick because I'm always interested in courage versus confidence because to me, courage is more valuable than confidence because courage is like confidence with the absence of any like evidence that it could even work. Like that's to me kind of courage. I don't know how to. I am curious your difference between the two and why you
what
chose courage over confidence.
What resonated for me was I had heard it once framed that there's two definitions of confidence. One is it's a feeling of certainty, which I think is what we often associate. Like when we think about like, hey, do you feel confident or not? Like it's usually very feeling driven and or how sure we are that we can execute or do the job or whatever the case might be. The second the second definition was confidence is an act of trust. And that resonated a lot more for me because what we've talked a lot about is like the number one rule of confidence is like actions need to come first, feelings come second. Where I tie this in with courage is because I know a lot of, and I don't know what your experience is in volleyball. It's like you start to be around world-class performers, like they have self-doubt, they have insecurity, like they have fear, like they have all of these emotions that are quote unquote uncomfortable. And yet the difference is, I think, what they choose to do with those. Like it's how they choose to act. And so the way I've kind of sifted it down is like to me, like mental strength, for example, like it is not about positive thinking. It's about taking positive action no matter what you're thinking. And
I like that. That's really good.
and what that boils down to is it's like there's a reason why we call them like first responders, like all these people in these high stakes roles and jobs. Like I know that they have fear or uncertainty, and there's a lot of different emotions that they're managing, and yet what defines them is they go towards the fire, they go towards whatever the crisis is in spite of those things. And so for me, I think that linking it all full circle to like leadership, you know this better than even me. Like, there's a lot of moments as a leader where, like, you sometimes have to go first when other people don't want to go first. You sometimes have to say the thing when other people are looking for you to say it, or they are hesitant to go, or you have to model the way before you can request it or ask of it of your players and so forth. And so, so for me, long-winded to basically get to, like, that's where I've kind of landed on it. And a very simple way, like from a practical, it's like, okay, well, how do you do this? This is very simple, but I basically said, like, you need to use and more intentionally. And what I mean by that is, like, if you had like a Venn diagram, two circles, on one, it's like your emotion. So again, it's fear, it's self-doubt, it's hesitation and things like that. On the other side, it's your actions and it's your commitments, like whatever it is that you're choosing. It's being the leader, it's what you're committed to, it's trusting yourself. The middle that bridges it is the word and, because it's like, hey, I feel nervous and I can still show up and give my best effort. Hey, I didn't sleep great last night, and I can still trust that what I've done and how I've prepared myself is going to be enough to do the job. Like that kind of, I think using and is a way to not get stuck in the emotion, but it helps shift you towards, okay, well, what are you going to do? Because ultimately, like, you don't get a gold medal for positive thinking. Like, you
See,
you
I've
don't get
always,
it.
I think I've taken too much of a tangent on that, but we just got back from Hawaii and we played two matches and we won both matches. Hawaii's in the Big West. We have 16 players. We have a pretty full roster. It's spring, so they're going to get more players in the fall, and they probably weren't at full strength, but we won both matches. And in the second match, in the second set, there's a pivot point in volleyball and probably in all sports where you can see a team just kind of go like, it's probably not our day. Like, it's probably, this might not happen. And it's just like, you can just see it. And your team sees it, and your team has like two responses. They can kind of like stay to the standard, or they can kind of sink down a little bit and go like, okay, like they've kind of, but like I look at our team last year, and I think we lost 7 matches, and I never once saw our team do that. And so to me, it's like what you were describing. I feel like that's a courageous team where I think our confidence might have gotten shook a few times, but we were courageous throughout. And again, it happens to a lot of teams. And maybe I'm, too positive thinking or whatever, but I don't remember it happening to our team. Now we lost matches, but at no point did I see that kind of like, ugh, I don't know if we can do this. Like, I think this team's better than us. And, I told our team that there was this timeout in the second where I was like, I think that happened to them. And now we have this choice, because I think the great teams really lay it on then. They respect the game, they respect their opponent, and they go, man, like, we're going to blow this thing open. And I've been on both sides of that. But when you talked about the confidence and the courage and just the self-doubt that creeps in, I do think your confidence can get shook, but you can stay courageous throughout. I think that's really cool. I love the what you said about say the positive thinking thing again, because I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
write that
yeah,
down,
yeah.
because
Mental
it's
strength
not.
is
Go ahead.
is not about positive thinking. It's about taking positive action, no
No
matter what
matter
you're
what you're
thinking.
thinking. Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell my team that. I like that a lot.
The the thing that I think, the word that you use that I think is really pivotal there, because I agree with everything you just said, like, was the choice. And I think that's where it's like, the reaction may be, again, self-doubt, uncertain, fear, whatever, like, or like, hey, we get shook a little bit and confidence gets, the choice is the response. And I think that's, it's a little cliche, but that's where I think the differentiation between reactions and responses come into play. And one additional line, and I don't know if this resonates or not, but is, I've told players this, like, I care more about your second thought than your first thought. Because,
I
like,
like
the
that.
first thought is like, hey, like, you may have the reaction that's not very helpful, or that it's not very productive. What I care, though, is what you choose to do next and what you add on top of it after. And, like, that's to me where I think you start to create, separation. Or again, to your point, like, if you get shook a little bit, it's like, okay, well, how do you respond more effectively? So, yeah. So as a sidebar,
Great
sorry,
stuff. No, I
I've
was taking notes through all
hijacked.
that.
Yeah. It's but I but the point where, I'll bring it kind of back full circle, because one thing I loved was actually at the very beginning when you were talking about failure, and just kind of, I think you said, like, how can you take something from it rather than it take something from you?
You
And
got
I
to
thought
take more
that's,
from it than it took from you, because it's going to take from you.
yeah,
That was
I
hard
think
for me
that,
though, because that one took a lot from me, and it was like, you know
yeah.
what? It's why I got the journal. It's like, okay, this has got to fuel me for the next year. I got to get more out of it than it got from me.
So if we, from the lens of a coach, for your players, what have you found to be most helpful in terms of helping your players like cultivate a mindset, an attitude that that does respond more effectively to those failures? Or how do you prepare them? How do you train? Like, I mean, I don't know if it's how do you prepare them for failure, but like how do you train them so that way they don't get side railed from it?
I don't know if I have the best answer for that because it's supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be a comfortable feeling, but um, failure. Failure is not something like you're not avoiding failure. You're shooting for success. And when failure happens, it's like I do think you accumulate it and it gets you somewhere you couldn't have gotten without it. Like you have to look at it that way. And I do remember, I got here in 2017. In 2016, the year before we got here, the program was under 500. I think there's 315 NCAA volleyball teams. I think they were ranked 189th. So they were really had a rough year. And in 2017, that very first year we were here, we got to, I think our RPI was like 30, and we won the conference, and it was this nice turnaround. 2018, we kind of were hovering around there, but we were still losing 8 to 10 matches a year. Like you can still be in that top 25 range, and you're not picking off the top 10 teams. We're still losing probably a fourth to a fifth of our games. And we adopted this mindset of win or learn, and that was a really big thing for us for a number of years, because it was just like we understood that we weren't always going to win, but we had this choice, and we were always going to win or learn. And I remember that being a really big thing for us in 2018 and 19 in particular, where 2019 was an interesting year where we were unseeded. They only seed the top 16 or 32 teams in the NCAA at that point, but we were unseeded. And so we upset in the second round to go to the Sweet 16 round. And the Sweet 16 round, we're playing a number 2 overall seed. It was Texas on the road. And we were the lowest seed remaining. And we beat Texas that year in 2019. But our record was like 20-13. Texas was like, whatever they were. They were probably 32-1. But it was like, I remember that year not feeling like you ever hit a loss that was just like, man, this is as good as we can be. Like this is a marker, and it showed us where we can go. So, while we've lost less per season, sometimes the failure feels about the same, where, if you had 10 losses, it felt like X. Now you have 4 losses, but they all feel double. It still feels like X. Like it still feels the same. So we're still dealing with that win or learn mindset moving forward. But I don't think you ever get like really comfortable with it. I do remember one thing that really changed my thinking in my early 20s. I really struggled with failure, and the fear of failure was very paralyzing to me, and didn't know how to deal with it. I was very immature. And I remember reading Phil Jackson's book, Sacred Hoops, and he talked about failure's it's a intimate dance partner in the dance of competition. And that really resonated with me, of like Phil Jackson, who's, you just think of him as winner, and he's talking about failure being so integral in this dance of competition that we do. And I thought he just wrote about it so well that I was just like, it's okay to like talk about it and like work through it. That was 20 years ago at this point, and I still remember that as being like for me, a very pivotal moment of like, it's okay to like deal with this. Like this will happen. It'll happen again, but you're okay. Like your character is fine, and like you will be fine, and move on. That was a big moment for me.
It's an important and sometimes forgotten like perspective shift of knowing like, hey, if you want to go and hit the game winning, or like have the game winning serve, or hit the game winning home run, or throw the game winning touchdown, like those moments also live in the same space as the opposite, where like you may fail. Like it's in those same exact moments, and like that's part of, I think, where again the courage comes into play, is to put yourself in the arena and know that like you're kind of signing up for both possibilities, and obviously you're going to do everything that you can to try to create success and to have it go your way. And the reality is, like, when you signed up to play and signed up to compete, you signed up for more than just the success.
That helped me with competition, and the fact of like it was probably in that same breath so much respect for the opponent, where I didn't probably have that as a player. I just wanted to win, and I didn't care at what cost. I wanted to beat our opponent down. And then when you become a coach and you get on both sides of it more, and you're a little bit further removed from the control sometimes, you realize like, man, the stakes, we put up the same stakes when we showed up. And one of us is going to, win and one of us is going to lose. But there's so much honor in like putting up those same stakes. So it's like, it really helped me with my just like respect for my opponent, because I really struggled with like having a healthy relationship with opponents or anything like that, because it just felt like, man, like you're over there and I'm over here and this is like the battle lines are drawn, like that's it. And yeah, you realize that in those moments, like you said, there's another side to that coin, and you're going to be on both of it at some point. So it really helps with you have to respect your opponent because they gave you the opportunity to have either of those outcomes.
Mhm. Know at this level, like one, everybody is good and you're competing against the best. And so therefore I think, teams and individuals, performers, we're always kind of looking for like our edge. Like we're always looking for these like new ways to keep kind of staying ahead and find like that like competitive advantage, if you will, or refine things to find it's not always about adding, I know, but sometimes it's refining. Where would you say right now, either for yourself and or the program, that you all are kind of looking or like kind of, yeah, looking for some of those edges right now to take things to that next level for you?
Well, if this was a volleyball podcast, I'd get more specific on the technical things we're doing, because I
Yeah.
do think, and for anybody, I would assume if someone maybe listens to this podcast, are probably interested in volleyball. Some of them are out of system setting and defending right now is a really specific technical thing that I think the game is kind of lagging in defending and the offense is kind of ahead. And there's this really fun interaction between offense and defense where like defense doesn't have the opportunity to react until the offense does something. So like offenses always evolve faster and then defenses catch up. And so I think that right now we're at that point where the defense hasn't caught up to what the offense has been doing in what we call out of system. So that's bad pass situation. That's maybe the non-setter setting. So we're investing really heavily in that because I do think that that's an interesting part of our game that's evolving. So technically, and like that, our team would probably give you the same response because we're like so clear on like this is really going to be probably the 2 points that we want against these teams that we're playing, this and that. But then the edge, from a more kind of broader stroke, I think is like belief. And I know we talked about courage and confidence, and it's funny. I find myself thinking the most about probably belief at this point because um, it just it's one of those things that it's hard to put your finger on. It's like, belief to me is, the belief in yourself. It has to be higher than probably the evidence that you have to support it. Like, I remember I used to listen to Bill Simmons podcast. I don't really listen to him anymore. I've lost touch with him, but he used to talk about basketball in the sense that like the most dangerous guy was the irrational confidence guy. And I always remember that because it's like, it's so true. And like, I've been that guy in rec league basketball before where like, I'm making everything and I shouldn't, but like, I'm the best player there is because I'm just like, I can't miss and I don't know any better. And so I'm like, man, how can we harness that for top performers and make it repeatable? Because it's one thing for me to show up at the Y, 100 times and one time I'm on fire. Like, okay, but that doesn't win you a championship. Like, that's just fun the one time it happened. How do we repeat that and get that mindset, that irrational confidence, which I think is probably healthy with high performers who show up every day and deal with failure? And, those are public. And then there's, comments in the social media and there's all this stuff trying to chip away at you. How do you get that unshakable belief? So again, that's something that we're investing in. I think how we identify our leaders, how we shape this team, is really going to play into how that looks for our team. But like I said, this is why I love coaching. I think the story's not written yet. Like I don't have the blueprint for the team to say like, oh, just do this today and do that next month, and then you'll have belief. Like that's fine. Like that's not how it works. So it makes coaching fun though.
It does. It does. One of my favorite moments. We were in Atlanta last year and we shared this message because it kind of corresponded right on the cusp of I think it was like the Pacers in the postseason. They had like this huge come from behind win, and like sometimes that's when you see these like the probability charts all of a sudden
Yeah.
go
It's like point
viral where
one.
it's yeah, and then all of a sudden it totally shifts and things. But the message, and it was great because like, hey, we were in Atlanta, so like sorry to anybody that's a Falcons fan, but we were like, it was hard not to use the Patriots story in that Super Bowl and that comeback. But the underlying message of is was built around like don't judge the ending while the story's still being written. And I think we all are very guilty of that sometimes, where it's like we immediately start to jump to, or we start to make predictions as, okay, oh, this is how it is, or this is how it's going to play out. And the reality is, like, there's a lot of moments where it's like if we judge the ending too soon while it's still being written, we kind of create, or we potentially diminish a possibility that still exists. So I love that. I love how you're kind of talking even about just stories within the season and how that's even framed for the group. I want to kind of bring us to the last little bit here. We'll call it like the last set, I guess, if we want to
Nice.
go. But yeah, really cliche. That would be as a fairly new dad. I'm working on my dad jokes and my
That was a
cringy
good one.
jokes. So yeah. So that being said, I'm interested building off of that question for you as like a leader. You've kind of touched on this a little bit with your own reflection process, but how are you kind of personally trying to continue to kind of grow? And like, could you maybe kind of give us a glimpse into like what your development process looks like, where you go to, who you rely on, what you're kind of exploring, and so forth?
It's a good question too, because I think if you're not thinking about that, it's, not even if you're in a leadership role, just in general, like the feeling for me is like if you're not growing, you're dying. That's what it really feels like. So whether that's, for me from a physical standpoint, like I do think coaches, like sometimes we put like, a little do as I say, not as I do. And that was probably true at the beginning of my career, like just as far as like health and nutrition and God, I can't remember the book. A book that I read, but they talked about coaches treating themselves as high performers, and like the meals that go for athletes on game days don't probably serve you the best to be your best as a coach that day. And that really made me think too, because like I watch our team eat, and it's like I can't believe how much they eat, and I'm not burning 4,000 calories a day, and that changed how I went about pregame meal and went about my timing. So like for me, there's a physical side of that, making sure that I can physically show up. But then there's a mental side of that too. I think that you're probably touching on as well, of like, I love reading. Like again, that's a cliche answer, but it's like, I've got 12 books that I'm going to read this month in 12 months, or that I'm going to read this year in 12 months. And the best one actually is right next to me. It's this Dan Casey's a football guy, but Bring Your Own Pencil. I actually found him on social media, but it's a really just very simple broke down book, and it's a football book, but I'm interested in any sport and any coaching. Before this was Inner Game of Tennis I reread, and there's tennis specific stuff there. But I just think if you're not constantly it's just looking for new information and seeing how that challenges your own opinions. That's a big thing too. I think for me is like making sure that I know that I've got strong opinions, but I keep them loosely held. And I'm not too married to any one way of doing things or any one idea, because, we have a saying with our group, the best never get bored with the basics, but I do think the basics evolve sometimes, and you need to be like open to that. It's funny. There's nothing but books next to me. That's probably the answer to you. But like this Pat Summitt book, first of all, this is like made me cry, because like, she gets dementia and she's coaching, and it's like her memoir of that. But a lot of her coaching, it was like, I really wholeheartedly disagreed with. Like she would have this mentality about how she would coach her team. Her teams were excellent. Like she's one of the most storied, coaches ever. And it's like, so for me, it's not just reading and then adapting things blindly. It's like really challenging, like, what do I really believe in, and what really is true for me. It was a fantastic book, a great read, but there were so many things in coaching that I'm like, man, like I think we can be successful doing the opposite of what she was saying she had to do to be successful. But we're totally different people. We're brought up different ways and all that. Sidebar on that too, I couldn't believe it. My team, okay, women's sports, not one player on our team knew who this was. First of all, I did it like this. I covered who it was, and then I showed them Pat, and then and they still had no idea who this was. And so I was like, I couldn't believe, like, that made me feel really old, I guess is what I'll say, is basically the reason we have Division I volleyball, we have all these great things, these coaches that came before us with Title IX and all that. I was like, we need to re-educate the younger generation about how lucky we are and what we have. So an interesting tangent of the fact that our team didn't know who Pat Summitt was. But long answer to your question, I love reading. I love challenging my own ideas, evolving my own ideas, getting that from a great staff and getting it from the books that we read and the information we surround ourselves with.
I love it. And I was chuckling to myself because myself and a colleague, we volunteer coached a high school girls varsity basketball team this winter. And at one point, I remember we're doing a team huddle, and he's like, "Did anybody know who John Wooden is?" And
No
you could
chance.
just no chance. And I was sitting there like, oh, this isn't gonna go. Like, not that it wasn't gonna go well, but I was like,
Yeah.
they're not gonna know. We're gonna have to find a different. We got to find a more
We're
current.
going to
And
teach you how to put on your socks.
yeah,
But that would be a new idea for them. They would be like, you guys are amazing. Where'd you come up with this?
yeah, exactly. Sometimes the best ideas they just come full circle down the road too.
That's the truth.
So I uh, I love that. My last question, Dan. This is the question that I like to pose to everybody, kind of at the end. But I'd be curious. What's something that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, uh, I mean, there's multiple levels of it with my family, but I think I've been very fortunate. I think one of the biggest life decisions for people is the partner they end up with, and like so, my wife's name's Laurel, and she's like the perfect partner for me. And like we've grown, we've been together for 11 years. Well, we've been married for 11 years, together for 13, and the way we've grown in our relationship and like made each other better is one of the things I'm most proud of. And then within that too, I've got three boys, and they're 11, 8, and 7. And like they're still boys, but the men that they're becoming and the way that we're connecting and what I'm learning about myself through them is like it's so cool. And it's I thought I was a pretty good coach before kids. And then parenting and the parallels with parenting and coaching, I'm just constantly learning about leadership and about patience and all those different things. So yeah, those two things in particular come to mind of like just very, very proud of the role I get to play within each of those, and just watching my kids grow up and being a part of my family is like the coolest thing I get to do on a day-to-day basis.
Can I sneak one in here? Can I add to that a little bit? Or what has been one thing that you feel like having the boys, becoming a dad has like shifted for you, either as a leader, as a coach, as a person? What have you noticed maybe some of the one of those shifts being?
I think it is healthy. Like, when we talked about that failure thing earlier, I think that was tied into it, where it was like, before kids in particular, they're just, there's more to life right now, and so like losses still sting. I think I learn from them quicker and I grow from them better. But I used to think, man, if I undervalued them, then somehow that defined me. And now the fact that I have, a great family to come home to and kids that sometimes didn't even watch the match and don't even care when I get home, like that has been a really healthy evolution for me in dealing with, the chosen profession I have of, wins and losses and failures and all that. So I think that's a really, really cool just kind of side effect of having kids that I think has opened the door for me to coach well beyond where I think I would have been capable to. Because now I feel like I can coach into my 70s. I would love to. I'm in my 40s now, but it's like I cannot picture my life without it. But I don't know if I would have had that longevity or the opportunity for some longevity if it wasn't for my kids making me not take things so seriously.
I love it. No, that's awesome. Well, I'm super grateful again for your willingness to do this and reflect a little bit and kind of peel back the curtain a bit as to what goes through your head and how you try to show up and the culture and that you're trying to build there at Louisville. So, just want to thank you again for taking some time for the conversation, Dan.
This was great, Zach. Appreciate it.